But one team that's not making any bad decisions at least so far, is the Bruins, right?
They're not making bad
decisions.
decisions.
No bad decisions, right?
No bad decisions.
I mean, if losing is not considered a decision,
everything's rosy.
They're certainly losing many decisions.
I don't know. There was one game I remember going to earlier this year when the Bruins were in the middle of a line change and Dennis Weidman made a cross-ice pass at the Bruins bench.
Wow.
I mean, that's like saying, please call too many men on the ice on us, please. Weidman had his first half last year was all-star caliber.
Yeah.
He should have been in Montreal, but because the NHL has this silly rule, you have to represent every single team. The Bruins could only get so many guys because Canadians, even though they didn't deserve it, had a half a dozen in the game because they were hosting on the centennial of the franchise, blah, blah, blah. And so Weidman didn't get to go to Montreal. He should have been there. I say that to say this. He stinks this year.
Yeah. And didn't he struggle in the second half last year as well?
Well, the whole team sort of did. I mean, except for Bergeron really came on.
Yeah.
When the team got weaker, he got stronger. And now Weidman seems to be within arm's length of his top level, but he hasn't been able to play at that top level with any consistency. I think part of the problem right now is Weidman's partners have been changing, and he's having to carry the partnership in some cases. Lately, he was playing with Matt Hunwick. Well, Matt Hunwick is still, a regular for the first time in a full season. So, and that was even in doubt at the beginning of the year. So I just think that right now the Bruins, if I'm Peter Chiarelli and I got those Toronto picks, do you want to wait? Do you want to see him work it out? Yeah, sure. But you know what? We're going to get to the holidays, and if this team is NHL 500 at the holidays, that's going to be a big problem because NHL 500 doesn't get you in the playoffs. That's a sham.
But don't you think
you got to win half your games?
But will they, if they are, even if they're in the even if they are sitting 10th or 11th in points at halfway point, isn't there some expectation that that's going to it's destined to equal out in time for them to at least make the playoffs?
I wouldn't necessarily assume that because the NHL, as far as I'm concerned, I said this last year, even though the Bruins knocked it out of the park last year and had 50 wins, first time since 1993, they had 53 wins, and they had 116 points, and they finished first in the East, and it was a really great season. But at the end of the day, they did not separate themselves from the many teams who need things to go right that could go wrong, and things not to go wrong that could go wrong in order for them to achieve their potential. There's your Detroit Red Wings, and there's your Pittsburgh Penguins, which as long as Crosby and Malkin are healthy, that team's not going to fall too far.
Right.
So, but most teams in the NHL in this age of parity, they need, especially the Bruins now, when you take this club and you look at the injuries they've now had, playing without last year's top line. And
is that where they're at right now?
Well, Kessel went to Toronto. Savard broke his foot. Lucic broke his finger. Savard's making a trip to Atlanta, but I don't think he's playing. He hasn't practiced with a team yet in a real practice, so I don't see it. But maybe within a week or 10 days, both those guys are going to be back, and then the Bruins could start trying to figure out what they got here. And it is a young point in the season, but you can't climb as fast as you can fall. You can fall quick because you don't need anybody to help you fall.
Yeah.
But you can't climb quick because you need help to climb quick.
Yeah.
You got to jump over a lot of other teams, and all these overtime games, put little points in your way of climbing up. So it's a long road back, and they can do it. I think they will do it, but it's possible they won't.
Well, you mentioned Phil Kessel, and I think a lot of people are looking at. Are you apologizing for the cough or for mentioning Phil Kessel?
That's fine. I brought him up first.
But a lot of people are kind of looking at what he's been doing his last few games and lamenting his loss now more so than they were earlier in the year.
It hasn't changed my opinion. Kessel scored a team-high 36 goals last year, but only 7 of those goals came against teams that made the playoffs. And you can say, well, he did tie Mark Savard for the team lead in playoff goals with 6 in 11 games. But I think one of those goals was against the Carolina Hurricanes, and it wasn't a pivotal goal. So
he's the A-Rod of the Bruins is what you're saying?
It's a little young in his career to call him that. I ain't saying that Kessel doesn't have an easy power skating stride that is something the Bruins could really use right now, or the release they could really use right now. But at the end of the day, he wanted to be paid like a core player. And so far, in his return to Toronto, he's been that. But let's face it, he's only played 7 games so far. And he's been great for them in these 7 games, but there's a lot of adrenaline happening there. And, and everything's cup half full right now for Kessel in Toronto. It ain't going to stay that way.
It seems like it's almost to a T exactly the same situation that the Patriots had with Richard Seymour, where they had an opportunity to make a trade with a bad team for a guy they weren't interested in spending money on long term, get a top pick in return, even though both teams knew that, in that season, having that player would make them a better team. And you're seeing it with the Patriots now. Their front 7 is not good right now and it's not just because they don't have Richard Seymour, but if they had Richard Seymour, there would be some question there. Is it still a good trade? Maybe it is. It probably is still a good trade, but and the Bruins clearly could use Kessel, but it's not as simple as that, obviously. But
one thing the great Harry
would make the team.
One thing the great Harry Sinden told me once is you never get worse on purpose. He says you never try to lose. You always try to win, and if you're in a situation where you're forced to lose, you don't willingly accept it. You do what you can to keep winning. Now,
but that doesn't mean that they didn't clearly and with foresight make their 2009-10 team less than it could be.
I think the Boston Bruins really honestly believed that they could move on from Phil Kessel and have. Well, I don't think anybody thought that they were going to win 53 games and get 116 points.
Right.
Nobody thought that. But I think the Boston Bruins felt entirely confident that this was going to be a playoff team and a potential Stanley Cup contender with perhaps one or two of those first rounders at the trade deadline.
Right, being able to swing them around.
For the kind of player that puts you over the top. Now, if they attempted to use one of those picks, it would be to try to get themselves some goals so they can feel better about the possibility of making the playoffs.
So that's a major difference because
it's a huge difference.
Yeah, because that was not part of the.
And I asked Peter Chiarelli that question: when Lucic and Savard went out of the lineup, will this alter your stance on how you might be tempted to use those picks in a deal to try to make sure the season doesn't go the wrong way? And he said, absolutely not. We had this 2 years ago when Bergeron got hurt. And we battled through as a group. We'll do it again.